Okay, we're getting ready to start the part 2 of our pull-on pant. And what I am doing here is sewing the pocket bag to the front and back panels. I have 4 pocket bags, 2 fronts and 2 backs. This is a back panel. And I'm not going right on my seam allowance. My seam allowance is a 1/2 inch, but I've come just inside there on a 3/8 inch stitch to sew my pocket on. I use a stitch length of 3, back stitch and back stitch. Then the second part of this is we're going to cast off this edge with a zigzag. So, and I want to use a close stitch together like a 2 and a very wide stitch on the zigzag width. And I'm going to go down through here and zigzag the edge of this panel, including the pocket, all in one. You don't really have to lock stitch the zigzag. It's not that critical that you do that. Now, see, I've got it zigzag. Now you can use a serger here. You could use a different stitch on your machine to finish it off, but you just want to finish it to prevent raveling. Now I'm going to take the pocket and I'm going to keep the seam allowance going toward the pocket, just like this, and I'm going to stitch on the pocket side. I'm going to do an edge stitch just right along the edge of the seam on the pocket side. Make sure you put this on the pocket side. And I'm going to lock stitch this one, and I want to keep it close to the edge. See how I'm holding my hands, pushing it so that it doesn't overlap here? You can also press this on the iron first. If you'd like to give it a nice press, that's a good idea. And then you're going to come all the way to the other edge of the pocket like such. Now just lock stitch. Okay. After you've finished all your panels and you've got them to this point where you've got your pocket attached with an edge stitch right along the side there, see how nice that is? Then we're going to start putting the panels together. So this is a back panel and this would be a front panel here. Now when you lay it out on top of each other, and I have one laid out, see, like this. When you lay it out on top of each other and you pin it together, don't be concerned with your rise area. See, because my rise area, my front is definitely smaller and doesn't come all the way out. That's okay. It doesn't have to match here. All we care about is the side seam. Now remember the dots we made with the yellow chalk? I'm going to sew to this dot, back stitch, stop, and go down here and finish off. The section I don't sew through is going to be my pocket opening. Now when I sew this seam, I'm going to go back to the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and it's going to be just inside the seam I made to attach the pocket. So here we go. I'm going to stop right at the dot. I'm going to back stitch, needle in, back stitch, and then I'm going to come down. I'm going to skip over this entire section, start at my next dot, go forward, back stitch, and finish off my seam, staying just about 1/8 of an inch away from where I attach the pocket. This makes a really nice finished pocket. It makes a difference of the pocket wanting to roll out every time you stick your hand in it, or it staying in place and looking smooth on your hip. So now what we have is this beautiful pocket opening, see? And because we have the edge stitch in there, whoops, forgot to cut my string. Because we have the edge stitch in here, let me put it up here where you can see it. We have this beautiful little edge that's going to stay put. So you put your hand in your pocket. See, it's not going to roll out. This stitch is going to control it and hold it in there. Very nice. Now the last part of this is we have to sew up the pocket bag. So we're going to come around through here. We don't care about this. It's not important. It'll get caught in the waistband when we put our elastic on. But I want to line up my pocket bag. Now you may want a pin or 2 in here because you're going to come to areas where this is off grain and it could stretch a little bit. So you might want a pin or 2 in this pocket bag itself. And I'm going to come all the way back in to where my seam connects right there. That's where I'm going to stop, right there. Okay, so we're going to go around through here. 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. remember, I'm going to get I want my seams together. So I want to make sure they're right on top, and they should be because they're sewn together. And I want to come right into that seam right there, 1/2 inch. Make sure you keep your seam allowances flat so you don't get them all bunched up there. And I'm going to stop, needle in, back up, and that's it. Now I have completed a pocket. How easy was that? So we have our pocket sewn up, and the next thing I would do is zigzag along the edge or finish this off with a serge so that it doesn't ravel as well. And go all the way through here and do the same thing so it's all the same treatment. And here's the front pocket laying this way, and there's my pocket. So after a good pressing, that's going to be a really pretty finish. So, okay, so let me get set up and we'll do part 3. Okay. Now, part 3 on this, we've got our pocket with the edging on there so it won't ravel out, and this is what it looks like. And I've also sewn the inseams together, which we'll talk about just in a moment. Now this pocket, you can see what I've done here. It's nice and pressed, and my hand would go in here, and it's going to stay really pretty. Got a little crease in there. I'll steam that out. But it's a very pretty pocket. It's going to stay put. It's not going to roll out because it's got that nice edge stitch in there to hold it down. So what we're going to do over here on this one, we want to press it as well. So I'm going to open it up like such. This is the front, and the pocket needs to go toward the front. So what I'm going to do so these seams lay really flat, I'm going to take the back seam allowance only and just clip it right below the pocket like such, just a little clip, and also up here at the top of the pocket. And I'm going to roll it over where I can get a good press on it. I'm going to keep the pocket toward the front, and I'm going to press these side seams open, nice and flat, like such. Just like that. See? Beautiful. That will be really flat inside and won't be lumpy when you're wearing your shorts. So now I'm going to turn it over to the right side, so the right sides are out, and I'm going to complete the pressing process. Keeping that pocket toward the front, just like that. See how nice it wants to go there and how beautiful that edge stitch is in there? So I'm going to lay it nice and flat and finish pressing my side seam. Okay. See, beautiful. Nice and clean. Now, let's talk about the inseam. So this is what I've done on the inseam. I've sewn the inseam. I'm going to do a flat felled seam, but I'm going to take a shortcut on this. I'm going to take one step that's normally part of a flat felled seam out and just do 3 stitches instead of 4. So my next move is, I've got this stitch down, and I used a 5/8 inch seam allowance here on this inseam. Remember, wrong sides together when you do this, okay? And then I've trimmed the edge down. See how I've got it trimmed about half the size of the other side? So I'm going to take it like this and press it over top. And I pushed my flat fell seam toward the front. Usually in jeans, that's how it's done. It's usually pushed toward the front. And I'm going to turn it under just a little bit there, like a small quarter. And I'm going to use my pins so I don't burn my fingers. And I'm going to do a second pressing on here, trying to keep it nice and even all the way down through here. That's a little wide there, so we'll tuck that back under. Just like this. And then these are glass head pins, so I don't have to worry about burning them, melting them to my pan. See, and I'm going to give this a nice steam on there. Now, when I come back to my sewing machine, I'll just take these pins and put them in there to hold it down. I'm going to stitch right along here. And the end result, it's going to look like a flat felled seam because I'll have this stitch in here and then the other stitch running right alongside of it. I want to focus on trying to keep them the same distance apart. So when I'm running my foot down through here, I'm going to find a line and keep it right on top of this line right here. Okay, let's go to the machine and I'll show you the next part. Okay, so what I have here is a finished flat felled seam. Now this takes a shortcut because normally you would sew right sides together and it would look much like this, and then you would put another edge right here. But because we put wrong sides together, we're utilizing the first seam as one of the sides of the flat felt. And then where we turned it under and pressed it, we've just edge stitched along this side. So I'm going to show you how to do that right here. And you want to turn your pant so you can get to the seam. I've got the leg inside out so it's easy to get to. And I'm going to sew right along my pin line over here and finish off my other side of my flat felt. So up here, stay with 3 on my width. I definitely want to stay with the 3 stitch length when I'm doing this because I want it to be apparent. I don't want it to look like there's no stitch. Oh, there's my little buddy. Say hi, Jack. And we're going to go right down the edge here. And once we get to the bottom, we'll take our pins out. Lock stitch. Now, raise my foot up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave one side of my pant right side out. See how nice that looks when you get it finished? And I'm going to take the other one, thank you, I'm going to turn it inside out. So I'm going to put it, get up here where you can see, I'm going to put the right side out one inside the wrong side out. See, like such. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my flat felt seam and I'm going to put them on top of each other and pin them together. Now the next seam I'm going to use, and you can use options. I could have done a French seam here. I could have just sewed a regular seam and finished off both edges and pressed it open flat. So it doesn't have to be a flat felt. I'm just using seams to show you how you can utilize them in certain places. This one I'm going to put together and I'm going to sew the whole rise up with my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to zigzag them together and put an edge stitch on it. So let me get it all set up here. Somebody's trying to steal the limelight. So I'm pinning the rise from front to back, just like this. This is why it's very important you make sure you sew a front to the back leg at the beginning when you're sewing your pockets on, so you don't end up with 2 backs sewn together and 2 fronts sewn together. Then it doesn't work, and it can happen easily, so it's definitely something that can happen. So now I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to go back to my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew down through here, backing up as I start. And then this one I'm going to zigzag my edges together because I'm going to press them to one side and edge stitch my rise. I like to put some sort of stitching on the rise, either a 1/4 inch top stitch or an edge stitch, just to reinforce the seam so it doesn't rip out. Just gives it a little reinforcement. And like I said, there's other things you can do. It's a little difficult to do a flat felt because of the curve here, so it's not the best seam. You can do it, but it's a little awkward, and sometimes it's not the most comfortable seam in that area when you have a very curved rise. Now in jeans they do it, but jeans have a different rise shape, and the flat felt seam works a little better in there. They do sometimes put them in jeans. But I'm just going to do this and then put a top stitch on it, and that should be plenty good enough.